Geaux Rouge is going live. You'll notice live in the corner.
I got it.
All right. So, good morning, Facebook Live. If you're tuning in, my name is Franz Borchardt. I'm the host of the Geaux Rouge Show, owner of the Borchardt Law Firm. I'm chilling out with some of the who's who of LSU. These are the men and women, although there's no women in the group. It's okay. We got other women there come on in a future episode. These are some of the men and women that help make LSU run behind the scenes that you may never have heard of. I've got Matt Lee, Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Support Services. I've got Sam Bentley, Vice President, Office of Research and Economic Development. I've got Jose. Say your last name, Jose. Aviles, Vice President for Enrollment Management, and then Winston DeCuir, culinary expert and Vice President of Legal Affairs and General Counsel. Gentlemen, good morning. How are you guys all doing?
Hey,
Doing well.
Good morning. Doing
well.
great. Thank you.
So if you're watching and participating in this panel, if you go to the Geaux Rouge Facebook page, we are actually live. We're live streaming on Facebook right now. And in a few minutes, we're gonna go record on Talk 107.3. If you are a fan of any of these guys, or for that matter, Louisiana State University, if you're like me and you spend a little bit too much time at LSU, please consider sharing this video. You can just click share, and that works. Let me turn down the volume there. All right.
I'm on Facebook.
So while we're killing some time, shout out to Mimi, Matt's wife, who was actually a guest before Matt, and she came on and we were talking about LSU, and I actually had never met Matt before. Mimi was actually a guest twice, and so she talked to me a little bit about what Matt does, and I knew Winston. I've had food with Winston before, so I thought it'd be good and fun to have an episode that deals with, how does a flagship university work? Like, who are the people that help make that work? The plan, for those who are watching, if you're wondering, well, why LSU first? It's just because I went to LSU for a few degrees. I do plan on having Southern on here in the near future to have the same kind of conversation. How does a flagship university work behind the scenes? What's necessary? One of the things we're going to talk about today is, how did COVID change everything? So you guys know, though, Jose is the crown jewel of the guests, because someone who will remain nameless bet me that I would not be able to get Jose as a guest here. So I'll give kudos to Matt for getting Jose here, but I'm winning a bet today. Just throwing that out there. So life's been good, guys. How's the semester going?
Going great. We're cruising right along at full tilt. Students are in classes, faculty are teaching. I'm sure Sam will speak to the research endeavors, and Jose is out there pushing hard on getting folks recruited, because we're always thinking a year ahead.
So one of the interesting things, Jose, that we're going to talk about is, I'd always thought of admissions and enrollment as just getting them in the door. But I've come to understand that that's only part of the job, right? Part of it is keeping them at LSU once they're in the door. And then the relationships that form between you guys and the students. I also was interested to find out that you guys have a program for students that don't quite fit the admission standard, but if they go through the program, you guys may let them in. And I don't know if that's going to be something we can talk about or not, but I think that's a wonderful program, especially with some of the skills that you guys are teaching those students. For my day job, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I represent a lot of young men and women that don't get those opportunities or don't take advantage of those opportunities. So that's something I'd certainly appreciate. And then, of course, I'm curious about Winston and what it's like being an attorney, a general counsel for large scale. How hard can that be? What kind of issues come up? So.
Oh, I'm sure you can imagine quite a few of them.
Well, and so I have the luxury, Winston, and you guys probably figured this out. I do one area law. So I'm like a neurologist. I don't deal with the feet. I don't deal with the hands. I do one area law. And of course I'm a neurologist because that's like the sexiest area of medicine, right? poor Winston has to deal with everything, right? Residential issues, COVID-19 issues, constitutional issues that we may not think about, Title IX, you name it. Poor Winston has to deal with it.
You skip the expensive issues, the financing of buildings. We deal with bond issues, $100 million here and there. Financing is a huge issue for us.
I see that. I just neurologist. So but while we're killing some time before we get on, I went to LSU in '97, hung out for about 4 years for my first degree, got a second undergrad degree in the 5th year, kind of piddled around a little bit. Then I went to LSU Law School. I spent the better part of 9 years at LSU, plus or minus. I mean, it was closer to 8.5, but we'll just round up to 9. So Brian Haldane tells us we're ready. So Brian, tell me when I can do a countdown. If you guys will do me a favor and just mute yourselves, I will. Just mute yourselves. I don't want to be the one who mutes you. I have the power to mute you. I just don't want to be the one who does that. I want you to mute yourself. So Brian says ready when we are. Brian, can I go on and do a countdown? All right. Counting down. 3, 2, 1. Good morning. This is your host, Franz Borkhardt, welcoming you to another episode of the Geaux Rouge radio show. This is episode 61. We're in season 2. Really, it's like episode 3 or 4, but who's counting? This week on the Geaux Rouge show, we are letting LSU take over. We are very blessed to have some of the behind-the-scenes folks that make LSU happen. Special thanks to Matt Lee and his wife, Mimi Lee, for accommodating me on this. But we're going to get to that in a second. So we're going to let LSU take over today. The Geaux Rouge show is brought to you by the following sponsors. These are the men and women that make the show possible. NAI Ladder and Bloom Commercial Realtors. They also sponsor a commercial real estate podcast that I get to host, which is fun and exciting in particular because I know nothing about commercial real estate, which is kind of the shtick of the show. So definitely check out NAI Ladder and Bloom, great commercial real estate firm. The Smith Shanklin Sosa personal injury law firm. These guys are your go-to personal injury lawyers. They don't stand on trucks. They just get the job done. I love the folks over there. They're very, very community oriented. Breck Parks, Sullivan Steakhouse, your go-to neighborhood steakhouse. You definitely want to check out their happy knockout beverage. I hear it's very, very good. It's hard to only have one of them. Sullivan Steakhouse. La Divina Italian Cafe, open every day with your custom made from scratch breakfasts. And last but not least, the Borkhardt Law Firm. That's my lemonade stand, the finest criminal defense firm in the universe. Well, maybe not the universe, but definitely Baton Rouge. Those are the sponsors. We deeply appreciate those businesses for helping us have a radio show. Before we jump into LSU, if you want more information about the Geaux Rouge radio show, go to www.geauxrouge.com. You can also go to the YouTube channel, which is oddly enough named Geaux Rouge. It's a Geaux Rouge channel, so that's not very hard to find. We're also on social media, and we are also on Talk 107.3 on demand. So without further ado, I reached out. This is the story, guys. I reached out to Matt Lee and said, I want to do an episode all about my alma mater. We have the flagship university situated in our city, but very few people know and understand what it takes to run a university. We see headlines in the paper, but the day in and day out operations, how do we get students in? How does the university deal with legal issues that run the gambit of buying buildings to pandemic? How does the provost work, and what do they, what is all these things? I said, Matt, I want to do an episode that breaks down the behind the scenes folks that make LSU work, function. And by the way, we're just scratching the surface here. While I'm appreciative that we have all the guests here, we've got a whole bunch of men and women further behind the scenes that we may get on in a future episode. So these are important folks, but by the way, guys, these aren't the only folks. So we've got Matt Lee, Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Support Services. We got Sam Bentley, Vice President, Office of Research and Economic Development. We've got Jose Aviles, Vice President for Enrollment Management. And then last but not least, Winston DeCuir, Vice President of Legal Affairs and General Counsel. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the Geaux Rouge show. We are going to start, and you guys can unmute yourself. We're going to start with you, Matt. Matt, I want you to talk about a little bit about, so you're the Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Support Services. In English, what is your job?
Sure. Well, first of all, Franz, thank you for inviting us on. We're always happy to be here and promote LSU and the good things that we're doing. I am a two-time graduate of LSU. I firmly believe in a public mission of the institution, and it's always super exciting to be at a flagship research institution. As the Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Support Services, basically what I do is coordinate with our 12 academic colleges and with a variety of our vice presidents to ensure that LSU is an accessible institution as a public institution, in the sense that we have appropriate on-ramps to students that aspire to come here, and then to help put policies in place to ensure that the way the student experience is governed on their arc through the institution helps ensure that they get graduated in a timely manner. And then I also help support the academic programming. We have in the neighborhood of 235 to 250 different academic programs at the undergraduate and graduate level here. So we are very diverse in the academic programming that we provide. And then, so that's the basic contours of what I do. And I have 10 different units that I oversee: the Center for Academic Success, the Academic Center for Student Athletes, the Registrar's Office, and a whole host of others, which perform academic support functions to ensure that our students can be successful and that we can transition them out of the institution into roles in the nonprofit sector, to graduate study, into the labor market, and so forth.
So what you're saying, Matt, is you've got a full-time job.
It's pretty exciting, yeah.
So did you ever think, I mean, you're a two-time graduate, did you ever think that you'd end up at LSU?
So no, I did not. First of all, I don't think we discussed this, but we actually have some commonality in terms of our intellectual interest, because you're a criminal defense attorney, but I'm a criminologist by training. That's actually what
I am aware.
Right. So that's actually what my academic area is. I'm an expert on homicide and murder and violent crime more generally. The way that translates into being a vice provost for academic programs is that it doesn't. It's basically a different set of skills. So no, the long and short of it is I did not envision that I would be doing this kind of academic administrative work, although there is some history of it in my background, because my father was a community college president for 20 years. So I did actually grow up on a college campus.
So I will tell you very quickly, I have both defended murder cases, homicides, and I've prosecuted. And I was the rookie prosecutor that was at the crime scene on a double murder suicide, who was turning green because the bodies had been there for a while. So yeah, I'm that guy. Matt, welcome. We're going to move over to, we're going to go on to Winston. Winston, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well. Thank you for having me on.
So you are kind of like the legal nucleus of the LSU system, right? Talk to me a little bit about what that is like and what your job entails.
Well, basically, we operate a small law firm within LSU. When you think about it, we have 6 lawyers. I have 2 healthcare lawyers, one at our healthcare center in New Orleans, one at our healthcare center in Shreveport. I have a real estate lawyer on staff that handles most of our leases. And then I have 3 pretty much generalists that handle everything from student discipline issues to HR issues to basic contracts, procurement, and then we have our whole litigation defense. We farm out the litigation, but we have to monitor it for potential liabilities or, potential judgments, that type of thing. So it's like running a small law firm.
So Winston and I guys have hung out before and talked about this. I could not fathom the day in and day out legal issues. So my clients sometimes create drama, and sometimes drama just kind of happens, but I cannot, the biggest headache I have in a day is whether or not my printer is going to work, Winston. I can't imagine the small explosions, large scale explosions. And we were talking about it, and we'll talk about it later. One of the things I just never thought about was LSU builds something or buys a piece of a building or something, which of course involves commercial real estate and all sorts of regulations and bonds and all that. wrapping my brain around that. Now, let me ask you this. How long have you worked with LSU?
I'll have my 1-year anniversary on February 4th.
Okay. We're going to come back.
Relatively recent.
So we're going to come back to Winston. And in particular, if you're listening on Talk Window 7.3 or on Facebook Live, you need to know, it's very important. Winston has some mad cooking skills that we're going to come back to. We're going to jump now to Jose. Jose, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, friends. Good to see you. So,
Jose, you are the vice president for enrollment management. Talk to me about what that means.
Yeah, I think often with enrollment management, it's one of those things that is not well understood. I know the Office of Admission oftentimes is the kind of crown jewel of the work that we do. But enrollment management really is an office or function at a university that's tasked with recruiting and working with students who are the best and brightest and most capable students that we can get our hands on in the recruitment process and who are interested to come to an institution, and then ensuring that we are serving them well through the application process and that we are competing well to get those talents on this campus. But then once they're here, enrollment management really is the function that is tasked with ensuring that we are meeting students where they are at the point of admission, and then ensuring that we are supporting them towards their success in graduation at this institution. So a lot of our work really is in conjunction with the functions that Matt Lee described once students are here, to ensure that, again, students aren't getting caught up with the bureaucracy that we tend to create in higher education. We know that nationally, the students who drop out of college, only a small fraction, less than 20% of them, are dropping out because of academic reasons. There's a whole host of other things that are leading to a reason why a student departs. And in a state like Louisiana, we take great pride in making sure that we're upholding the promise that we're making to students at the point of admission, and that we're getting them across that stage to graduation. So that's kind of the work that we do in a nutshell in enrollment management.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, Jose. I'm going to state on the air, Jose may be the prized guest today. Somebody made a bet with me that I couldn't get Jose on the radio, so I'm going to be having ice cream later, thanks to Jose. Last but not least, Sam. Sam, how's it going, bud?
Doing great, Franz. Thank you very much for having us on the show today. It's a great pleasure.
Now, Sam, I hear you're also a culinary wizard. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I enjoy cooking. I've done most of our bread baking for the last 30 years in the house, and I probably grow peppers that are about as hot as anyone else grows in Baton Rouge, and we do a lot of good stuff with them.
Do you do sourdough?
I do not do sourdough. That does.
You and I will talk.
Yeah.
So Sam is the vice president of the Office of Research and Economic Development. Sam, what does that mean? What is your job?
Well, let me describe sort of in a nutshell what LSU's research role is. We're a flagship university. We're a land grant, sea grant, space grant university. And going all the way back to the Morrill Act that established land grant universities in the 1870s, we have a chartered mission to conduct research that betters the condition of the people of Louisiana. And that can mean an awful lot of things. At an R1 university, our research portfolio is about $150 million a year. And that could be everything from running the LIGO laboratory out in Livingston Parish, that detected the first gravity waves from way out in outer space back in 2015, to someone who's studying social inequities related to medical services during the pandemic, or anything in between. So it's a really broad portfolio. My job is to lead a service organization. So we help bring people together. We provide the backbone for services that people need, whether they're writing research proposals or a need to do analyses in special facilities that we run on campus, or also some of the compliance aspects like laboratory safety, like research misconduct, and also the good part, helping administer awards. So it's quite a broad portfolio, but it's all about providing services to facilitate the success of our faculty, staff, and students in research.
Awesome. All right. So moving right along, we're going to talk about COVID and how LSU has met the challenge. And then in the first segment, I want to finish up, guys, with the number one misconception that you believe people have with regard to what you do about LSU. So be thinking about the misconception question. That may be a little bit more expansive, but let's talk about COVID. We'll start with you, Matt. So obviously we're in COVID world. Education, life has changed for all of us. I go to court now, sometimes on Zoom. I go to court sometimes in person. I had my first trial last week in a Zoom courtroom, which was crazy. Talk to me about, as an institution, what has LSU done to continue to carry out what it means to be a part of LSU, the mission, the teaching mission, because it's from the student standpoint, they are expecting a certain experience. Obviously, that's changed. Talk to me a little bit about what LSU has done to confront those challenges.
Sure. Well, so part of my job is to keep my fingers on the pulse of what's going on, around the world and around the country, and to always be thinking 6 months or 12 months out in terms of where we need to go, right? We need to be skating to the puck, not chasing it around. So I can tell you that in January of last year, I was aware that there was a nascent pandemic that had not yet been declared, starting to emerge. So in February, we had already started communicating with the faculty, start thinking about how you might transform your classes to a remote learning environment, because this thing is very likely to come our way. And then, of course, in the second week of March, we had to declare that we were moving online. As you know, LSU is a big place. We have 28,000 students at the undergraduate level, 4,000 or 5,000 more at the graduate level. So it's a big operation. It's a big ship. It's hard to just pivot on a dime, so to speak. We have about 7,000 course sections that are offered at any given semester, 1,500 faculty that are staffing those up. And basically, a small number of those were already being offered remotely, but we had to get the resources in place in order for people to, like I said, turn on a dime and start to pivot those courses to a fully online delivery. Luckily, we have very good relationships with our online division, LSU Online, overseen by my good friend, Vice President Sasha Thackerberry.
Shout out to Sasha.
Yeah, Sasha, she's a big hitter, good friend of ours, and we work, hand in hand, talk with her every day. They were instrumental in getting resources available to our faculty to help them learn the techniques and platforms that were needed to teach online. Simultaneously, though, is that from the learner's side, students needed appropriate tools too in order to be able to sort of upskill and get ready to learn in a different environment. So the long and the short of it is we put a bunch of that in place to round out the spring semester. We spent all summer preparing for the fall, and come the fall semester, basically our delivery modules were such that 50% of our courses in the fall were delivered either fully face-to-face or hybrid. Another 50% were delivered completely online. About 72% of those were being offered fully synchronous online, so doing a live thing just like we're doing now. About 28% were fully asynchronous, meaning that it's kind of much more self-directed. And we are in that same mode right now, and those proportions are basically the same right now. And then we're planning to be back basically fully face-to-face for the fall. It's an extraordinary undertaking, a lot of work on the part of the faculty in particular, but a tremendous amount of work on the part of the support staff and the students, quite frankly.
So pivoting to Jose, I want to talk about enrollment and what you guys are noticing with regard to enrollment in a pandemic world. Have you seen any trends? Have you noticed anything? I would imagine if I'm a parent or a potential student, these are things I'm concerned about when looking at a university.
Yeah, no question. And we are certainly seeing that there is a significant lag in how students are behaving through this process. That's very different than previous cycles. I think with the pandemic, I think there's probably just higher priorities. But one thing I would say about this entire process, right, that in American society, the transition into college is such a rites of passage moment in the life of a young person. And it becomes such a monumental thing for families. Many of our families, you think about, 30% of our students come from outside the state of Louisiana. And those students are, those families have been saving for this moment. And so now you are having to kind of engage in a college search process virtually through Zoom, through a lot of, electronic communication, whether it's through social media or through email. It makes it very difficult for families to think about the investment and the cost of going off to college and making an informed decision. So our team has had to, as Matt described on the faculty side, our team, starting with our admission office, has had to do some really innovative things that I think COVID has forced us into. But I think many of us in the work of enrollment are recognizing that this is now the new normal, that we can reach students and families in ways, in dynamic ways, virtually, that we really never were pressed to do, and still be effective in making sure that students and families can get the information that they need to engage in the process effectively. One of the big things that we've seen in the state of Louisiana, our resident applications have been we're trending behind pretty significantly coming into December, and then kind of flipped. That was very unusual for us. We've always had, I've been here for 4 years, in these last couple of years, it's been kind of a sense that we've always been ahead of the curve. This is the first year where we kind of lagged, and then we kind of got ahead of it. We were saying the same thing with financial aid applications. So, I think there's just a general lag in the way students are participating in the process.
So it's interesting to me, and we got about 2 minutes before our first break. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, we'll take a break, but the show between shows will continue. And when we pick back up, we'll talk to Winston and Sam a little bit about the same topic of COVID-19. How's that affected your job? And I kind of want to know, Sam, after the break, about what research has been done from the university with regard to the pandemic. But one of the interesting things that I experienced was Dr. Sasha got me to take an LSU online course to experience it before the pandemic. And I was I was like, I don't know about this. This is kind of weird. And this is before Zoom and everything became a thing. And it was an amazing experience. Now, my course was like a leadership course. So it was only a very short course, but taking courses online, participating in this new world is certainly something I think LSU can adapt to. And, there's the phrase, the obstacle is the way, is poignantly on point for this, because this is creating opportunities to do things differently and to be inclusive. We are having to take our first break. If you're tuning in, you're listening to the Geaux Rouge show. We've got LSU in the house. We're talking about the behind the scenes things about LSU that you might not know about. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back for more information. Before we go to our break, for more information about the Geaux Rouge show, go to www.geauxrouge.com. And if you're watching this episode and you're like, hey, I got an idea for a guest, email us at info@geauxrouge.com, and we will talk about your suggestion. And 9 times out of 10, we get those people on. So we're going to take our first break. Stick around. We will be right back. All right. So we're at the break. We gave Brian a little time to clear. This is the show between shows. We got a couple of minutes. So if you want a beverage, guys, you can go get a beverage. One of the things I'm going to ask when we come back is, I was curious what research, Sam, LSU is doing with regard to the pandemic. The natural thing is to go to vaccine research, but I'm sure there are a lot of different other things that are happening. And then, of course, I have to ask Winston, what is it like advising from a legal standpoint a university during a pandemic? Whether it's dorm room life, whether it's, Winston and I talked, and we may go into it, we may not. One of the things that I've talked in legal commentary about is, can a university, can an education institution, not just a university, but elementary school, middle school, high school, can they make kids wear a mask? Can they make kids get a vaccine? And it rears all sorts of constitutional issues that counterintuitively actually deal with criminal law. Some of our favorite constitutional amendments in the sector. So we'll talk about those things. The other thing I want to talk to you guys about when we come back is what are the things that people just don't get or common misconceptions? I would imagine, and one of the misconceptions I had, Jose, is, for example, and I mentioned this at the start, is I always looked at your role as just getting them in the door.
Right.
I never wrapped my brain around, well, enrollment doesn't just mean getting them in. It's not just admissions. It's also keeping them here and seeing what opportunities you can give them once they're here. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about when we come back. And anything else you guys want to kind of talk about? If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, please share. All you got to do is click share. If you know one of these guys, it's always helpful to tag them in the share. Give them a shout out like, hey, that's a nice tie, Winston. You look great on the Geaux Rouge show. Although I got to tell you, Matt's tie looks magnificent.
It's a nice deep purple.
That's a deep purple tie. I wore my LSU Columbia collar shirt today.
Well, my wife. I have an in-house clothing advisor. She's a professional shopper.
So I actually dressed down today. I had court this morning, and I dressed down. I changed when I got home. I am in my home, but I will tell you that your wife will confirm that I can sometimes be a little extra in my fashion. Typically, I'm a bow tie guy, but I can be a little over the top in some of my fashion decisions, which has a time and place. But I wanted you guys to be the stars today. Although I got to tell you, Jose's office looks the coolest out of all your offices, by the way.
Yeah.
Jose's, I'm just throwing that out there, Jose. Your office. Now Sam's office looks very spacious. I'll say that. So while we're killing some time, I will ask, from a logistical standpoint on campus, just so people have an understanding, which buildings do you guys operate in on campus?
Well, Matt and I are in the T. Boyd and D. Boyd buildings that are bookends for the clock tower.
Okay.
So if you're standing out on the parade ground with your back to the law school, looking towards the clock tower, Matt's to the right and I'm to the left.
And
great offices.
I'm over in the president's office in University Administration on West Lakeshore, right next to Lodcook, between Lodcook and U High.
I think I've had some matters over there as a lawyer. I've had some matters over there. So typically, for those who are watching, I'm a criminal defense attorney. The way I normally interact with LSU from a legal standpoint is I do work with accountability. That means one of my clients is a student and they're accused of doing something criminal in nature, and there's an academic consequence. I dabble in Title IX. So if someone is either a victim or is accused of a Title IX violation, I represent them. And then occasionally I have other sometimes my clients get accused of doing crimes that are related to LSU, no big deal. So that is how I understand or know your building. And then Jose, where are you located?
I'm right across from Sam and Matt over in Pleasant Hall. So the entire enrollment management unit is here.
Nice. And by the way, how big is your team, Jose?
We have financial aid. We have the initial athletic compliance eligibility group, data analytics, and Office of Admission, Retention, Student Success. So we have about 5 or 6 units under enrollment management, about 120 folks.
Awesome. It's a lot of people.
Yep. It's a big place.
Yeah. Well, I do, since we are killing some time, I do want to ask, Sam used the phrase and I use the word flagship. And that's not just a arrogant term of big badassness. In the university system, Sam, what does it mean to be the flagship?
It means basically we're the sort of the top research university within the public university portfolio.
Okay.
And so many times we have a broader suite of, for example, graduate degree availability. We have a mandated emphasis on research and economic development activities that may or may not spread to to our peer university or other universities in the state. So
So one of my favorite, by the way, Sam, one of my favorite presentations I attended was by Andrew Moss with the Baton Rouge Area Chamber with regard to patents and research. And I'm not a patent attorney, but I, as an outsider, had no clue of how all that worked. And I was just sitting there with eating imaginary popcorn. I was like, man, this is fascinating.
That's right.
And I deal with Andrew a lot, or I used to deal with Andrew. Andrew was involved in Pitch BR.
Right.
Helping entrepreneurs out. So I used to MC those events when we had events. So we are actually, it's time to come back, guys. So I will do a countdown. Brian, tell me when you're ready for the countdown. And then we'll jump back in, and so you guys know, I'm going to let Sam and Winston address the pandemic question. Then we'll move into the misconception question, and then we'll talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. It's your show, guys. I mean, I'm just here. I'm just a fly on the wall here. So, all right, we're counting down. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Geaux Rouge radio show. This is Franz Borchardt, your host. We are in segment 2 of episode 61. We are welcoming some brilliant folks from LSU to in the Geaux Rouge studio. My mini schnauzer dog is going nuts because that's what dogs do when you're trying to record a radio show on Zoom from your house. Molly says hello, by the way, guys. Before we jump into the second segment, I'm going to remind you guys that if you want more information about the Geaux Rouge radio show, go to www.geauxrouge.com. We have on-demand episodes there. We post wonderful pictures of food. We give you information about events. We're on social media, all the goodies, and it's all free, by the way. You don't have to pay anything. You just kind of show up and enjoy it. The businesses and people that make the Geaux Rouge show possible, our sponsors are NAI, Ladder and Bloom, commercial realtors, the Smith Shanklin Sosa personal injury law firm. That's your go-to personal injury law firm. Breck Parks, Sullivan Steakhouse, your neighborhood steak restaurant. I definitely recommend you grab the happy hour burger, guys. It is a very reasonably priced burger, and it's one of the best burgers in Baton Rouge. And I know that's a bold statement. We can talk about that off air. Who has the best burger in Baton Rouge? Maybe Sullivan's, maybe Overpass Merchant, maybe our mom's. I don't know. Borchardt Law Firm and La Divina Italian Cafe, serving select wines, ice cold beer, plus their exclusive sorbet mimosa. In the studio, on Zoom, on Facebook Live. Just to remind you guys, we have Matt Lee, Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Support Services, Sam Bentley, Vice President, Office of Research and Economic Development, Jose Aviles, Vice President for Enrollment Management, and then Winston DeCuir, Vice President of Legal Affairs and General Counsel. We've got a lot of VPs in the house, man. I like it. So we're going to jump back into what we were talking about before the break, which is the pandemic and how it affects the university. I guess I'm going to go first to Sam. Sam, in terms of research, development, and the research institution, talk to me a little bit about any kind of research with regard to the pandemic that's taking place via LSU.
Well, that's really a great question. First of all, I'd like to point anyone to our website, which is lsu.edu/research, and you'll find a big banner that says COVID-related research on there. And that's a
Awesome.
good place to dig into it. When we first started, we first had to shut down the research enterprise and go to emergency-only activities in our laboratories back in mid-March. And our initial activities for research and economic development in response to the pandemic were focused on the most acute needs that we were experiencing in the state at that time. And that included developing and supplying PPE, respirator parts, masks, gowns, that sort of thing, fabricating sanitizer for state facilities, and a whole host of other types of activities related to helping fill the gaps that we had in public needs at that time. For example, we turned the PMAC, the Pete Maravich Assembly Center, into a small-scale industrial manufacturing facility. Some of you may remember that, back during the post-Katrina days, we turned it into a field hospital. This time we turned it into a manufacturing facility, and over the course of several months, we produced thousands and thousands and thousands of individual items for answering things like, surgical gowns. In addition to that, well, once that most acute phase, we passed through it, people started catching their breath and doing amazing work. In the early stages, we also set up a supplemental testing facility, the River Road Testing Laboratory, that, according to our friends at Baton Rouge General and Our Lady of the Lake, filled a very difficult gap in testing capability in the early stages of the pandemic. And since then, our faculty have been working, writing research proposals and getting funding from everything from the state government to local foundations to the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health on vaccine research, on disparities in the availability of medical services, disparities in the response of individuals medically to exposure to the virus. So it's a very, very wide portfolio, and it went from 0 to 60 in just a matter of minutes. People turned on a dime, and it's become a really critical part of our portfolio over the last now almost a year.
Sam, tell us that website again.
I'll put it in the chat box right here.
I like it.
And you can, that takes us straight to the COVID research website.
www.lsu.edu/research/COVID_19 at index.php. But look, guys, long story made short, go to www.lsu.edu and use your powers of browsing, and you'll get there. So that leaves us with the legal brain behind LSU.
Yes.
So talk to me about the fun and excitement of being a pandemic-oriented lawyer at LSU.
If I could tie into what Sam was saying, he was talking about how quickly they started manufacturing thousands and thousands of pieces of PPE. What the legal team was doing was stressing about every time one of those pieces left and went into the market, we were thinking about a product's liability action. Everything we made, we were researching, if something went wrong or somebody claimed they caught COVID because a piece of PPE wasn't as good as it was supposed to be, are we insured? How do we protect ourselves? And eventually we went to the legislature and obtained a little bit of legislative help for the universities that engaged in making PPE, some Good Samaritan clauses, but that's what we were doing. The other thing that will surprise a lot of people is we spend a lot of time researching constitutional law issues over testing students and employees and now administering vaccines. What's unusual is it's not often lawyers have situations with very little precedent, but this is one without a lot of precedent.
You get to make new law, which we hate doing.
Yes, lawyers do not like to be in the business of making new law, especially with their clients. But we do have to take a lot of assumptions here. We have to take a lot of old law and extrapolate to how you would apply it today. And what we're doing is we're looking at rules that colleges set up for things like drug testing and past diseases like meningitis and trying to apply them to COVID to give us some legal justification for the decisions we make. For the public out there, every decision LSU makes, I can promise you, has had 2 or 3 lawyers behind it thinking about it and researching it for hours. We make no decisions just by the seat of the pants or in a vacuum because the costs are way too high.
So I have to ask you real fast, Winston, and it's going to sound like a stupid question, but it's really for the audience. Your client, as general counsel for LSU, your client is the university, correct?
Yes.
So that begs the question, who do you answer to?
That's actually an easy question. By state constitution, the legal entity for the university is the governing board. So there's a 16-member governing board that has the right to sue and be sued and is actually the client. And it's a juridical person. It's a juridical person, but it's no different than any other lawyer for any other corporation governed by a corporate board. lawyers for corporations answer to their boards. We answer to our board, and most of our work is for the president and the board.
All right. So I wanted that to be shared because I know people sometimes think, they speak of LSU as if it is one individual making a decision all the time, and that one person makes the decision, but it's bigger than that, right? So
yeah, and I can tell you real quick, Matt and Sam and even Jose will have had situations where we have lots of people in the university with different ideas. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work to get all of those ideas on the same page, but at the end of the day, we all answer to the board.
So occasionally, this is where I love what you do. Occasionally I'll get calls from big firms that will remain nameless, from partners that know me, and will ask me a question. They'll say, hey, I know you do criminal law. I'm about to do X, Y, and Z. What do you think? And if you ever hear the phrase come out of my mouth, guys, please don't do what you're about to do. That generally means you really shouldn't do what you're about to do. So that leads me, and I'll bump it back to Jose. That leads me to the question of, if there was one misconception about your job, about the university, if there was one thing you wish people knew, and I'll give you a great example. So I used to be that ignorant soul that would complain, this is me admitting I was wrong, that would complain that the optics of having a lazy river pool at the rec center didn't align with the fact that we had Coates Hall that was falling apart. And it just chapped my butt that was the nature of the world. And then some really good folks that work for the LSU Foundation and other entities in LSU explained to me how misguided I am. And I can admit when I'm wrong. So I wanted to bring up the topic of number one misconceptions that you guys encounter on a daily basis. This is kind of your ability, your opportunity to share that. So Jose, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's natural. Enrollment management itself has really been around since the late 70s and 80s as an area of administration at the university. And largely, you could find enrollment management in many of the private institutions that recognized that it was important fiscally for those institutions to manage their enrollment on those campuses, both students coming in and students staying. Public institutions for the last decade and a half or so, 2 decades, have started transitioning into a more sophisticated and intentional management of enrollment that goes beyond admission. So, our work, I think oftentimes is kind of just put in a box around the recruitment of new students. But as we said earlier, there's a lot more that goes into the work of enrollment management beyond first-year students. But this is what I will say most. I think that most folks, when they hear enrollment management or admissions, they think about numbers. They think all we do is about numbers. And there couldn't be anything further than the truth. I think for our work, we are first and foremost educators. Our work is of deep consequence to the state, to the country. There's only 50 flagship, we talked about flagship institutions, there's only 50 of us nationally. For the success of this country and our prosperity, we need to have folks who actually come in and engage in higher education and benefit from what that transforming power of education really is. Our job is to find students who are the most talented students and who deserve the opportunity to participate at an institution like LSU and ensure that we're creating a seamless process for them to get onto this campus and maximize their potential, and for us to support them so they can walk across that stage with a degree and go back into society and be of consequence to their communities, to their families, and to the state and to this country. So that's really the work that we're supposed to be doing. And our work is really the crux, the center of all of that, which can be very, I think, idealistic in so many ways. But I think for those of us who take our work seriously, I think that's what enrollment is, and I don't think folks really understand that.
So I would be remiss if I didn't mention something that I think that the university does, which is a tremendously good thing. You guys will take a certain group of potential students that for whatever reason, and I'm gonna let you talk about it, Jose, that for whatever reason just don't meet the threshold. Maybe it's because of academics, maybe it's because of socioeconomic reasons, maybe they're disadvantaged. And you guys have a program that if these potential students participate in, they get to come to the university, right?
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that is, to me, that is an amazing thing. And I don't think a lot of people know about it.
No, and it really, I mean, it's a program that really is anchored in that sense of opportunity and ensuring that we are providing, again, access as a public institution. Because again, we talked about LSU as a flagship, but we're also a land grant. And as a land grant institution, the core mission of that land grant, Sam talked about it from a research perspective, from our perspective, it really is that we are supposed to be accessible to our state residents here so that they can come in and participate at this institution. But from an admission and this program as an access program, what we're looking for is trying to measure students who have promise and potential, probably don't have the adequate preparation for whatever reason that exists in the disparity in education across this country, not just in our state. But we're measuring promise and potential, and then we're providing access with a summer bridge opportunity that really is anchored, or the promise of that summer bridge opportunity is really, the purpose is to really prepare those students to take on the rigors of an LSU education in a very short window. Now, this program, we're now 3 cohorts in, and what we're seeing is that the students who are participating in a Pre-Scholars Academy here at LSU, small numbers, we're about 50 to 60 students every year. We're looking to get that closer to 100. But those students are exceeding the metrics of the generally admitted students at LSU. They didn't have the entrance requirements coming in, measured by ACT largely. But from a broader perspective of the evaluation, we're seeing that these students are truly gritty, that they have a deep passion for and interest in learning. They have a commitment to future goals that are long-term versus short-term. They have leadership skills that probably are in their raw form, really not totally fully there yet, but we can identify that there's things there. So we're looking at these characteristics that we know oftentimes correlate to students and folks who are successful, but probably don't have the other parts of the preparation in place. And through this summer bridge program, we are then giving them the opportunity, that leverage point, to be in a close-knit community that work with faculty that support their success. And what we're seeing is by us investing in that, the student didn't change. We changed the wraparound services for these students. These students are then exceeding the metrics of the generally admitted students at LSU. So it's a pretty phenomenal program and a great venture that we've gone on to.
Well, I want to thank you as an LSU graduate, as someone who does what I do for a living. I think that's an amazing program. And giving, I often tell judges, you know, it's not as easy as saying this person's not good enough or they messed up. I mean, sometimes we have to have a legitimate and honest conversation about opportunity. And if the person takes advantage of the opportunity, fantastic. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to swing it over to Matt. Matt, number one misconception or thing you wish that people knew about LSU?
So for me, that's easy. I think the biggest misconception is that people think LSU is organized and run the same way a traditional business or industry is, and it's not. We have shared governance and we have faculty governance. And so basically everything is done by committee. And although if you look at an org chart, we appear to be hierarchically organized. In fact, we're not really terribly vertically organized. It tends to be very horizontal. So when we want to get something done, this is where Dale Carnegie comes into play, how to win friends and influence people. And you spend a lot of time talking with your faculty senate leadership, your student government leadership, your fellow vice presidents, your deans who oversee the academic colleges, which are a set of, basically, independent academic enterprises. And you bring in various units within, again, enrollment management or the Office of Research as needed. And, at least once a week, I'm sending something over to the Office of Legal Counsel for review. But it's not a place where people are handed out directives and they go run in that direction and do it. Things are basically done in a collaborative manner. And that is not something that is intuitive to folks who don't work within higher education.
Right.
And it's not just us. All of public higher education and much of private higher education is organized like this. But a lot of the news articles that you see in the Advocate or other places that discuss things that are going on at LSU, those of us who work here are always like,
Yeah, okay, so that's a good point, but you don't really understand that that's not the way we're organized. We just don't operate like that. We don't tell people you have to go do that.
So I will give Winston a shout out, because what people don't necessarily know, or they do know, is I occasionally do legal commentary. And while I can be occasionally critical of LSU, there was a Title IX, and we're not going to go into the Title IX rabbit hole, but I was asked questions about something, and it was based on a news article, and I was trying to explain that sometimes the outside media doesn't always understand what they're perpetuating. And look, in fairness to them, if you don't have the practical experience in something, that happens. Okay, Winston, you got 3 minutes, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and you have to give a little time for Sam. One misconception that you wish people knew something different about LSU.
The easiest one is that I wear a tie to work. I do not wear a tie. I hate ties. If ties could be banished from the existence of men's wardrobes, I would be a happier man. Most days I throw on a white shirt, a brown blazer, and a pair of pants and call it a day. One of the reasons I love my client is they don't expect me to wear a tie every day. So Franz, this is for you.
I appreciate that. I will also tell you guys, if you're listening out there, Winston's culinary skills. Now look, Matt Lee's got some good culinary skills. Matt does some veggie Italian dishes. I'm rooting for an invite over for dinner. But Matt does some good culinary.
We'll get there soon.
We're going to get there. But Winston posts this picture of this beautiful fish, and he's so smug about it. He's like, just salt and pepper, guys. And I'm like, there ain't no way that's just salt and pepper. So I like the fact, and Winston, I'm saying this because I have often said, and I'm saying this, you're the lawyer in the room. I often like lawyers that are more than just lawyers. And I like the fact that you have a life that goes far beyond just representing your client. And I think it makes you a better human being. And for that matter, probably makes you better to deal with as
I
a
have
human.
to feed 3 small kids is my other job, and keep a wife happy. So that takes a lot of time.
Which incidentally, shout out to your wife for liking the video.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, I'm going to give you the last word.
Okay.
One misconception.
We are open for business. I want everybody in the business community to know that LSU, particularly the Research and Economic Development Program, wants to help you in providing solutions. We haven't always been the best partners in that. Basic research doesn't always lead to solutions for the business community or industry, but we're open for business. We'd love to talk to y'all. Give us a shout. Just Google Sam Bentley LSU and you'll track me down. Give me a call.
Sam just said Google him. I love it. I say stuff like that, Sam. Google Franz Borchardt. All right, guys. So we're running out of time. Jose, Sam, Winston, Matt, thank you guys. I know you guys, look, you're all vice presidents of different facets of the university. You all do a tremendous amount of work. So I don't take it for granted that you giving me an hour and a half of your time today is significant. I certainly invite you guys to come back whenever you want to. We will certainly continue to showcase LSU and other universities. We've had the leadership folks on, we've had you guys on, we've had LSU Online on. I love the fact that we have a university that does so much good stuff. I need to get Southern on here. I need to get the community college on here as well. I actually taught a semester or two at Baton Rouge Community College business law, and that was a lot of fun. So I did teach a semester at the Law Center Winston. I'll just throw that out there. So I'm an adjunct on the books, an adjunct at LSU Law Center. That's about it for this episode of the Geaux Rouge Show. You've been listening to some amazing folks from LSU. This is your host, Franz Borchardt. Shout out to Brian Haldane at the radio station reporting. Listen, you don't have to just watch this on Facebook Live. You can listen on Saturdays at noon on Talk 107.3. You can watch us on demand at the Geaux Rouge website, which is www.geauxrouge.com. You can also go to the YouTube channel we have, Geaux Rouge. If you're listening on Facebook Live and you love what you heard today and you have other ideas for great shows, email me at info@geauxrouge.com. And certainly please share. My ego is tremendous, and the only way it can grow bigger is if we hack the Facebook algorithm. Share, and more share. Yes, I really do have a huge ego. That's it from us to you. Have a great week, and that is it. We'll see you next time.
Go Tigers.
Thank you, Franz. Go Tigers.
Brian's going to tell us when we're clear. Matt's already jumped off. Matt couldn't even wait a second. Matt's already jumped off. So look, guys, if there's anything you guys, we're still on Facebook Live, but I will tell you, anytime you guys want to come on, whether it's to talk about research economics, whether it's to talk about something that you're doing, Winston, Jose, man, I'm not just saying this, that program, I am so happy that you guys are doing that program. And to hear some of the successes that happen, that means, as a graduate, that means a lot to me, and I really do appreciate it. Guys, y'all have a great day. It's Tuesday. The weather doesn't look terrible.
That's pretty good.
If you need a legal commentator, especially on legal issues in higher education, give me a buzz. I'd be happy to.
Why do they even see? I don't know why Talk 107.3 even uses. They should use someone like Winston. So it's
you're
funny.
much better at this.
I'll say this. What you don't see is sometimes I go on there on Brian's show, and sometimes I'll look at Brian and say, "So which side do you want me to argue today?" And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Which side do you want me to argue?" I said, "I know what the law is, but I mean, do you want me to argue one side or the other side? It doesn't really matter to me." And it's interesting to me because mainly my commentary, guys, is criminal justice, which is why I'm upset that Matt jumped off. So, but I've been a prosecutor and I am a defense attorney, so I've been on both sides. And so, anyways, you guys get back to work. God bless. I'm going to take us off Facebook Live.